I remember the first time I truly felt invisible in my own home. My father, a man of pride and rigid rules, had already decided my place in life before I even knew how to dream. I was Isabella, smart, ambitious, full of ideas, but to him, none of that mattered. Because I was a girl, my brother, Lucas, was the golden child. Every praise, every opportunity, every small victory was his, handed to him simply for being male. As a child, I asked for a small chance to join my father on a business meeting. I wanted to see, to learn. He laughed at me. "Isabella, business is not for girls. Let Lucas handle it." I nodded quietly, hiding the sting behind a forced smile. But those moments didn't break me. They lit a fire. I started observing everything. The business, the family dynamics, even my brother's weaknesses. While he played the role of the perfect son, I was learning everything he was missing. And deep down, I knew one day I would prove him wrong. My father's favoritism wasn't subtle. At birthdays, achievements, even at dinner conversations, I could feel the invisible wall separating me from him. Lucas thrived on this attention, growing arrogant, thinking he was naturally superior, and I stayed silent. For now, little did they know, their disregard for me was planting the seeds of a storm they would never see coming. High school should have been a time of exploration, of discovering what I could do in the world. But for me, it became a daily reminder of the walls my father had built around me. I had always been excellent in academics, often topping my class in every subject. My teachers saw potential in me. One day, the school announced a scholarship for a prestigious internship program, the kind that could have set my career path years ahead of my peers. I applied immediately, excited to show what I could do. When I told my father about it, hoping for even a sliver of encouragement, his response cut deeper than any criticism I had ever received. "Isabella, that program isn't for girls. Your brother will apply. He's more suited to this." My heart sank, but I didn't argue. I knew nothing I said would matter. Lucas, with his easy smile and confident stride, applied and predictably won the scholarship. I watched as he received praise from teachers and family alike, while I was told to be happy for him. At dinner that night, my father clapped Lucas on the back. "This is what hard work looks like, Isabella. Take notes." I forced a smile, hiding the anger bubbling inside me. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a silent vow. If the world wouldn't give me the chance, I would find a way to take it. I would prove, not just to my father, but to everyone, that gender was never a measure of capability. The first taste of injustice was bitter. It made me realize that my dreams would not be handed to me. I would have to fight for them, silently, strategically, and with patience. And that's exactly what I began to do. I started studying my father's business dealings, understanding where he invested his trust and why he favored Lucas. I noticed patterns, weaknesses, opportunities, things he thought only a man could navigate. I took notes, built plans, and quietly sharpened my mind like a blade. Lucas, unaware of the storm forming in his shadow, continued to bask in his father's favoritism. Every misstep he made, I recorded mentally. Every chance he missed, I remembered. I wasn't just watching. I was preparing. By the time I graduated, I had already begun laying the groundwork for my revenge. Not out of spite, but out of justice. I wasn't going to just compete with my brother. I was going to surpass him in a way that no one, especially my father, could ignore. And deep down, I relished the thought of the day he would finally realize that the choice he thought was perfect, choosing Lucas over me, was his greatest mistake. After graduation, the real world became my classroom. I stepped into it cautiously, carrying the weight of my father's dismissal and my brother's smug superiority. Lucas thought life was easy for him. Doors opened with a smile. Praise came naturally, and the family business seemed like his birthright. But I was learning that the world outside our home didn't care about gender, only results. I took a position at a small consulting firm, far from the prying eyes of my father. The pay wasn't great, but the lessons were invaluable. I worked harder than anyone, often staying late, analyzing every project, every business report, and every flaw in my client's operations. While Lucas was relying on charm and his father's name, I relied on knowledge and strategy. At home, I kept my ambitions a secret. My father still refused to acknowledge any of my accomplishments. Every conversation with him was a reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. But I refused to let that define me. The first seeds of rebellion were small, almost invisible to the casual observer. I started networking discreetly. People who recognized talent over gender, who could offer opportunities I wasn't allowed to have at home. I learned negotiation, finance, leadership, and the subtle art of persuasion. Every skill I acquired was another brick in the foundation of a plan I wasn't yet ready to reveal. One evening, while reviewing a client's failing business strategy, I noticed a glaring error, the kind that could cost the company millions. I proposed a solution to my supervisor. He was skeptical at first, but decided to implement it. Within weeks, the client's business turned around dramatically. My ideas, though initially underestimated, had produced undeniable results. I realized then that my power didn't need validation from my father. I could succeed on my own terms. And yet, there was a part of me that longed for him to witness it, to see that the daughter he dismissed was capable of extraordinary things. Back at home, Lucas was already making mistakes in the family business. Overconfidence had led him to mishandle contracts, ignore risks, and mislead clients. I watched from a distance, noting each error, storing them like evidence for the day I would make my move. The more I succeeded in the outside world, the more my confidence grew. I began to see that the world didn't owe me recognition, but I could earn it. And in doing so, I would rewrite the narrative my father had imposed on me. Rebellion wasn't about confrontation yet. It was about preparation. Every connection, every lesson, every small victory became a tool. And deep down, I knew that when the moment came to confront my father's favoritism, I would not need anger or loud declarations. My results would speak for themselves. The seeds of rebellion were planted, and soon they would grow into a storm that no one in my family could ignore. By the time I returned home for the family's annual summer gathering, Lucas was already basking in another shallow triumph. My father had once again praised him for a brilliant negotiation, one that, from the outside, seemed impressive, but was actually riddled with oversights. I had spent months quietly studying the company's finances and operations, and it didn't take long to spot the cracks Lucas had ignored. That night, as the family gathered around the grand dining table, Lucas proudly recounted his so-called achievements. My father leaned back, beaming, completely unaware of the growing storm behind my calm exterior. I listened quietly, letting every word sink in, storing it like ammunition. After dinner, I slipped into the home office, under the guise of finishing some personal work. Pulling up the company's reports on my laptop, I began cross-referencing contracts, financial statements, and client correspondence. The mistakes were glaring. Overpayments, missed deadlines, and poorly negotiated deals that could cost the company millions. I knew I could confront Lucas directly, but that wouldn't have the impact I wanted. No, I had to act strategically. I discreetly drafted a plan to correct every error he had made, streamlining operations and creating solutions that were efficient, clever, and impossible to ignore. Over the next few days, I reached out to key clients under the pretext of assisting Lucas. They welcomed my insight because the improvements were immediate and tangible. Word started to spread quietly. A fresh, competent mind had stepped in to save failing projects. Then came the turning point. One of Lucas's major clients invited him to a high-stakes negotiation meeting. Lucas, full of overconfidence, fumbled his way through the discussion. I had anticipated this. Using my pre-prepared strategies, I stepped in subtly, guiding the client through alternatives and solutions without directly undermining Lucas. The client left impressed, praising Lucas for his team's foresight. And in reality, the credit belonged to me. The ripple effect was immediate. My father noticed the improvements in client feedback and operational efficiency. He commented to my mother, "Lucas has grown so much this year. He's really handling the company well." My heart sank momentarily at his misattribution. But then I reminded myself, patience. Recognition wasn't necessary yet. I was playing a long game. Meanwhile, Lucas remained oblivious. He bragged about his skills and continued to make errors, confident that the family's praise would protect him. I, on the other hand, had built credibility without drawing attention to myself. For the first time, I realized just how powerful silent competence could be. I didn't need to fight openly or confront my father with angry words. I simply needed to excel where they least expected it, to let my results speak louder than their biases ever could. That summer, while Lucas celebrated small, hollow victories, I planted the seeds of what would become my ultimate triumph. The turning point wasn't just correcting his mistakes. It was realizing that the very foundation of my father's favoritism, blind trust in Lucas, because he was a man, could be dismantled piece by piece without anyone suspecting they architect, and I was ready to begin that work. By the time autumn arrived, the subtle shifts I had engineered in the family business began to draw attention. Clients were pleased, operations ran smoother, and minor crises that would have previously spiraled into disasters were quietly resolved. Yet at home, my father remained oblivious. He still showered Lucas with praise, completely unaware that I was the one quietly correcting every misstep. Lucas, meanwhile, had become increasingly arrogant. He believed his father's confidence in him was proof of his superiority. He dismissed my insights, laughed off my suggestions, and even tried to take credit for ideas I had contributed behind the scenes. Every time he spoke, I felt a mixture of irritation and amusement. He was playing checkers, while I was thinking in chess. Then came the opportunity I had been waiting for. One of our company's external partners invited me to join a high-profile business conference, a rare chance to showcase my skills and expand my network. This was exactly the kind of platform I had been seeking. Recognition beyond my father's narrow, biased gaze. I accepted the invitation, careful to keep my involvement discreet at first. When I arrived, I quickly realized the conference was a battlefield of intellect and strategy. Executives and entrepreneurs from around the country were sharing ideas, forming alliances, and making deals. I immersed myself completely, speaking confidently, analyzing proposals, and offering solutions that turned heads. By the end of the conference, several influential figures had approached me directly, impressed by my expertise. Back home, Lucas continued his careless management. He missed deadlines, overlooked important details, and failed to see the consequences of his choices. I quietly used every mistake to build leverage, quietly setting up scenarios where my father could no longer ignore the contrast between us. Tension grew at family gatherings. Lucas would boast, expecting admiration, and I would smile politely, knowing the truth he couldn't see. My father began to notice subtle changes: smoother operations, happier clients, more efficient projects, but still attributed them to luck or minor improvements in Lucas's supposed skills. I realized something crucial. During this period, the key to my ultimate victory wouldn't be confrontation. It would be exposure. I needed to create undeniable evidence of my competence and Lucas's failures. And I needed to do it at the right moment, in a way that would leave no room for denial. Meanwhile, my confidence grew. Each small success, each unnoticed victory, strengthened my resolve. I was no longer the overlooked daughter. I was a silent force, preparing to shake the foundations of my family's perception of capability, gender, and success. By the time the next family gathering arrived, I was ready to escalate. Lucas was walking on thin ice, oblivious to the storm building quietly around him. And I knew that soon, the world I had been preparing outside the family's eyes would collide with the one inside, changing everything. It was during a quiet evening at home that I realized the moment for subtle maneuvering had passed. I wasn't just preparing anymore. I was ready to execute. Every misstep Lucas had made, every weakness I had catalogued, and every alliance I had, quietly formed outside the family, now became the tools of my plan. I started by strategically inserting myself into areas of the family business that Lucas had neglected. He had grown complacent, relying on charm and his father's approval, while I meticulously handled complex contracts, identified risks, and negotiated better deals. Yet I remained invisible, presenting my contributions as supporting Lucas's initiatives. Then came the first domino. I scheduled meetings with key clients Lucas had mishandled. With tact and professionalism, I corrected errors and provided solutions, making sure to document everything. Each client left satisfied, often sending feedback to the company, praising the thoughtful team handling our account. Lucas, of course, assumed the credit, unaware that I was quietly orchestrating a series of undeniable victories. At home, the tension between us began to build. Lucas sensed my growing influence but didn't understand it. He began attempting to undermine me, offering unsolicited advice or dismissing my suggestions outright. I let him talk, nodded politely, and smiled inwardly. Every insult, every attempt to belittle me only fueled my resolve. I also started reaching out to external allies I had met at conferences and networking events. Trusted advisors, clients, and industry experts became part of my silent coalition. They provided support, guidance, and validation that Lucas could never access with his arrogant assumptions. The next step was personal, a confrontation of perception. At a family meeting discussing a critical expansion project, I subtly presented a solution to a complex issue Lucas had been struggling with for weeks. I framed it carefully, using data, insights, and reason, letting the logic speak for itself. The board, unaware of the family dynamics, immediately recognized the brilliance of the plan. My father noticed. For the first time, he raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the clarity and precision of the approach. Lucas tried to interject, to claim authority, but he stumbled, fumbling over facts I had already mastered. The contrast was glaring, though my father didn't yet fully comprehend it. I had begun to tip the scales. Lucas's arrogance, his father's favoritism, and the invisible barriers that had once held me back were all unraveling, silently, strategically, with precision. By the end of this phase, I realized something vital. Revenge wasn't about confrontation or anger. It was about preparation, patience, and execution. Every move had been calculated, every opportunity carefully observed, and every weakness leveraged. The storm I had been building was no longer a thought or a plan. It was reality. And soon, everyone in my family, my father, Lucas, even those who had overlooked me, would witness what they had underestimated for far too long. The day had finally come. A family event that doubled as a public showcase for the company. Investors, clients, and prominent figures from the industry were all invited. Lucas was in his element, preparing to flaunt his supposed achievements, confident that his father's praise would cement his position. E, on the other hand, moved quietly behind the scenes. I knew that subtle victories had built credibility, but now I needed undeniable proof. A moment that would leave no room for misattribution. The event began with Lucas presenting the company's latest project. He spoke with confidence, but his arrogance betrayed him. He glossed over key details, made assumptions, and even misrepresented timelines. As I watched, I realized this was the perfect opportunity. When it came time for the Q&A session, I waited for the right moment. A potential investor raised a question about a problem Lucas had overlooked. He fumbled, trying to provide answers that lacked substance. I intervened, offering a concise, data-driven solution that addressed every concern. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. The investor nodded appreciatively, clearly impressed, and said, "This is exactly the kind of insight we need." Lucas turned red. My father's eyes widened. I could feel the tension building. The first cracks in the facade of favoritism were visible. I continued to speak, carefully balancing confidence with professionalism, answering questions, providing solutions, and subtly highlighting areas where Lucas had been ineffective. Without directly embarrassing him, the difference was clear. Where Lucas relied on charm, I delivered results. By the end of the session, investors were praising the company's innovative team, clearly impressed by my contributions. Lucas, for the first time, looked uncertain, his arrogance shaken. My father remained silent, processing what he had just witnessed. Later, at dinner, the topic of discussion inevitably turned to the event. My father, still proud of Lucas, but clearly intrigued, commented, "I must admit, someone on the team handled that exceptionally well." Very impressive, I smiled inwardly. No words were necessary. My results had spoken louder than any argument or confrontation ever could. Lucas, meanwhile, struggled to maintain his composure, sensing that the pedestal he had stood on was beginning to crumble. That night, I realized something powerful. Public validation was the ultimate weapon. It didn't matter how much my father had favored Lucas in private. What mattered was tangible, undeniable proof. A demonstration that competence and dedication were not defined by gender, but by skill, intelligence, and preparation. For the first time, I felt the tide turning. The storm I had patiently cultivated was now visible to everyone, and soon, the consequences of underestimating me would become unavoidable. The stage was set. I had carefully built credibility, quietly corrected my brother's mistakes, and gained recognition outside the family's walls. Now, it was time for the ultimate move, the moment that would prove once and for all that my father's favoritism had been a grave mistake. Lucas had been given the responsibility to negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal with a major client. This deal was supposed to cement his position as the family business's golden boy, but I knew the cracks in his approach. The overpromises, the mismanaged timelines, the lack of preparation. I didn't confront him openly. Instead, I offered discreet guidance to the client under the guise of a consultant, ensuring that the deal would succeed only if approached strategically. Lucas, blinded by his ego, made assumptions and missteps during the negotiations. I was there, silently correcting, steering, and protecting the company from disaster. Without him ever realizing who was saving the deal, when the client signed the contract, praising the team's professionalism and foresight, the credit quietly fell to me. Lucas attempted to take recognition, but the client, having interacted with me directly, couldn't help but acknowledge my contribution. Word spread rapidly. Even my father, who had remained willfully blind to my abilities, couldn't ignore it this time. During a family meeting to discuss the successful deal, my father looked at me with a mixture of astonishment and hesitation. Isabella, I didn't realize. I held his gaze steadily, calm and confident. Father, you never gave me the opportunity before. I didn't need your approval to succeed. But I hope now you see that capability isn't determined by gender. Lucas, red-faced and speechless, realized that every misstep, every moment of arrogance, and every act of dismissiveness had brought him to this point. For the first time, he saw clearly that I had been operating on a higher level, quietly, strategically, and effectively. The power dynamic had shifted. My father, humbled, finally understood that his favoritism had been misplaced. Lucas, humbled as well, had no choice but to acknowledge the reality he had ignored for years. I didn't revel in humiliation. This wasn't about vengeance in the sense of cruelty. It was about justice and recognition. I had proven that hard work, intelligence, and perseverance mattered. Not gender, not charm, not favoritism. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere had changed. My father nodded with a newfound respect, and Lucas, though still bitter, began to understand that the pedestal he had stood on had been taken from beneath him, not by confrontation, but by undeniable competence. I had taken control of my narrative, claimed the recognition I deserved, and reshaped the family dynamic forever. And in doing so, I realized something even more powerful. I didn't need permission to succeed. I only needed determination, strategy, and the courage to act. The ultimate revenge wasn't just proving my father wrong. It was proving to myself that no one, not even my own family, could define my worth or my potential. After the success of the major deal, the atmosphere at home shifted in ways I had quietly anticipated, but never taken for granted. My father, once blind to my potential, now regarded me with a mix of pride, surprise, and humility. Lucas, still stubborn, could no longer deny the reality he had been forced to face. I was his equal, if not superior, in skill, intelligence, and resolve. At first, the tension was palpable. Dinner conversations were awkward, as my father attempted to reconcile his long-held biases with the undeniable proof of my competence. Lucas, meanwhile, tried to regain his footing, but his usual arrogance now seemed out of place. I watched him, empathetic yet resolute. My goal was never to destroy him, only to show him the truth he had ignored for years. In the weeks that followed, my father began to include me in key decision-making processes. He asked for my input on strategy, negotiations, and business expansion, listening carefully in a way he never had before. It was a subtle victory, but one that meant far more than any single deal or recognition. I had earned not just authority, but respect. Lucas eventually approached me privately. His tone was hesitant, tinged with a humility I had rarely seen. I didn't realize. I underestimated you, I nodded, offering a gentle but firm smile. You weren't given the whole picture, but you've seen it now. We all have our strengths. It's how we use them that matters. The family dynamic shifted gradually after that. My father learned to value ability over gender, slowly breaking free from the biases that had once dominated his thinking. Lucas, humbled, became more cautious and aware, no longer relying solely on charm or favoritism to succeed. And I had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident, having navigated years of underestimation and prejudice to emerge not just victorious, but empowered. The most important lesson I carried forward was this: recognition and opportunity are often withheld, but resilience and strategic action can break barriers that bias attempts to enforce. By proving my worth through action, rather than argument, I reshaped not only my destiny, but also the perceptions of those around me. As I stood one evening looking out at the city skyline from the office I now helped manage, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The battles of the past, the dismissals, the favoritism, the constant need to fight for acknowledgement had forged me into someone unshakable. I had taken control of my narrative. I had claimed what was rightfully mine, and I had done it with intelligence, patience, and unwavering determination. The family that once doubted me now saw me not as the daughter or the sister, but as a force to be reckoned with. A reminder that true capability knows no gender. The storm I had patiently built had passed, and in its wake, I discovered not only victory, but clarity, independence, and a profound sense of empowerment that no one could ever take away. Looking back, it's almost surreal how far I've come. The little girl who was told she couldn't achieve anything because she was a woman has grown into someone who has claimed her place, not by demanding it, but by earning it, strategically, intelligently, and unapologetically. My journey wasn't easy. It was filled with moments of doubt, frustration, and quiet anger. I watched my brother receive praise I had earned in silence, and I endured my father's unwavering favoritism. But through every obstacle, I learned that resilience and patience are more powerful than confrontation. Success doesn't need to shout to be seen. It only needs to be undeniable. The ultimate lesson I carry now is this: never let someone else define your potential. Gender, favoritism, or societal expectations cannot dictate your worth. You define it through your actions, your persistence, and your courage to seize opportunities, even the ones you're told you don't deserve. I don't regret my brother's failures or my father's ignorance. They were catalysts that strengthened my resolve. My revenge wasn't about cruelty or humiliation. It was about justice, recognition, and proving to myself that I am capable of far more than anyone, even those I love, might imagine. Now, when I walk into a room, I do so with confidence, knowing that my voice matters, my ideas are valid, and my contributions are significant. My father has learned to value me for who I am, and even my brother, humbled, has gained a measure of respect for the person I've become. To anyone listening, do not let the limitations others impose on you become your reality. Observe, learn, prepare, and act. Let your results speak. Let your actions define you. And when the moment is right, step forward and claim what is rightfully yours. I am Isabella. I was underestimated. I was overlooked. But I was never powerless. And now nothing can stop me. The past shaped me, but it no longer defines me. And the future is mine. All right, everyone, that's all I have for today. If you found this entertaining, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. If you want to watch more, please check out our playlist. Finally, a huge thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, stay happy.